We're going to analyze a standard or deconstruct it in a manner that will help us really understand where we're going with this standard. So you'll want to look at pages 1 and 2 of your handout. For this activity, I've chosen the standard 3OA-A1. That's a 3rd grade standard. And the language of this standard is here. Interpret products of whole numbers. The rest of this is a little more information for us, and that is part of the language of this standard. But for myself to write down, I'm just going to really think about interpret products of whole numbers. When it asks us what the domain is, that's actually that second piece of the coding, operations and algebraic thinking. The OA stands for operations and algebraic thinking. The cluster is a smaller group of standards that are highly connected, and it's denoted with a letter right after the domain, and that is A. Represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. So we've answered the question of the domain and our cluster. To look at the key learning of this specific standard, we're going to go to our companion document, which your grade level facilitator should have already pulled up for you or directed you to pull up. If you don't know how to get to this, there are directions on page 1 of your handout. So I've scrolled through to page 3 or 5 of the companion document, skipping the introduction. I found my domain of operations and algebraic thinking, cluster A, and it tells me a little bit about what I can expect in this cluster, and you see there are a lot of terms because this is the first time that students are exposed to multiplication, and our standard is listed here. So when I think about the key learning, I read through this area, and students begin to recognize multiplication as a means to determine a total number of objects that are in a group or a specific number of groups. So it goes back to that repeated addition, which is what prerequisite skills are needed. If I clicked on these links, it would take me to 2OAC3 and 2OAC4, which talk about repeated addition and even and odd numbers within groups. I also want to look at any specific strategies that are called out. So I may think of them as total number of objects or arrays and groupings of objects. I will also think of the objects being in groups rather than individual things. This standard really focuses in on the component of rigor of conceptual understanding, because again, this is the first time students are introduced to multiplication.